Dust kicked under Jacob Hale's boots as he drove the last starving steer toward the empty corral. The cattle stumbled, thin as winter fence wire. Jacob Hale pressed a rough hand against the old bullet scar under his ribs. Pain lived there now, same as the drought. Then the stagecoach rolled through the ranch gate. A lone woman stepped down. Anna Whitfield, mail-order bride. She studied the dying pasture and the sick herd. Her eyes sharpened, like a doctor entering a battlefield. Jacob Hale felt the prairie shift around him. Because whatever skill that woman carried, his life was about to change forever. Before we ride deeper into the story, hit subscribe, ring the bell, so you'll never miss another ride through the legends of the Wild West. Now, let's get back to the trail. The stagecoach rolled away in a cloud of pale dust. Wheels creaked down the long road toward town. Then the sound faded. Only wind and dry grass remained. Jacob Hale stood beside the corral rail and watched the empty road a moment longer. His jaw tightened. He turned back to the work that never ended. A steer collapsed near the fence line, too thin to stand. Jacob walked over slowly, boots grinding the hard dirt. He knelt and tried to lift the animal's head. The steer's breath came shallow, dry, like wind through dead leaves. Jacob exhaled through his teeth. Another one gone. He reached for the revolver at his hip, then paused. Behind him, soft footsteps moved across the yard. Jacob lowered the gun. Anna Whitfield stood near the barn gate, still holding the small carpet bag she carried off the stagecoach. Dust clung to the hem of her travel dress. Wind tugged a loose strand of chestnut hair across her cheek. She watched the dying steer, said nothing. Jacob stood and wiped his hands on his coat. This ranch ain't a place for guests. His voice was quiet, flat as the prairie. Anna looked across the pasture. The grass lay yellow and brittle under the late afternoon sun. Fence posts leaned crooked. The herd scattered across the field like shadows. Too few, too thin. She stepped closer to the fallen steer, kneeling slowly beside it. Her fingers pressed against the animal's neck. Careful, listening. Jacob watched her, eyes narrowing. You know cattle? Anna didn't look up. Enough to know this one won't see morning. Jacob let out a rough breath. That makes two of us. Silence settled over the yard. Wind rattled the loose barn door. Somewhere a rusted chain tapped the post. Anna rose and brushed dust from her hands. Then she looked at the pasture again. Long, thoughtful. You've lost more than half the herd, she said softly. Jacob didn't answer. He turned toward the water trough, kicked the wooden side with his boot. The trough was nearly dry. A thin layer of murky water sat at the bottom. Anna noticed the mark carved into the post beside it. A brand. Not Jacob Hale's. Her eyes lingered there. Someone expecting payment? She asked. Jacob's shoulders stiffened. He lifted a bucket, carried it to the well. Granger holds the note, he said after a moment. The name hung in the air like smoke. Anna had heard it before. On the stage road. Men spoke that name carefully, like it carried teeth. Jacob hauled the rope. The bucket rose slow from the dark well. Half full. Not enough for a herd. Not enough for much of anything. He poured the water into the trough. The last steer wandered over, drank weakly. Anna watched the pasture again. Then the barn. Then the house with its sagging porch. Finally she set her carpet bag down beside the fence. I'll stay till morning, she said quietly. Jacob turned. His eyes hardened. Morning comes early out here. Anna nodded once. I wake early. Jacob studied her a long moment. Dust drifted across the yard between them. Then another steer stumbled near the fence. Struggled. Collapsed in the dirt. Jacob looked at the animal. then back at the woman the stagecoach had left behind. The ranch was dying. And now a stranger stood in the middle of it. Jacob Hale had a feeling the prairie had just handed him more trouble than he could carry. Night settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket. Cold crept in from the open prairie. Wind moved through the fence posts with a thin, lonely whistle. A lantern burned inside the small ranch house. Yellow light against dark timber. Anna Whitfield stood near the stove. A pot of water simmered softly. The smell of weak coffee filled the room. Behind her, the door opened. Jacob Hale stepped inside. Dust covered his coat. His boots left dry tracks across the wooden floor. He hung his hat on the wall. Said nothing. Anna slid a tin cup across the table. The coffee steamed in the lantern glow. Jacob paused. Then he sat. Hands rough against the cup. For a moment neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind scraped along the barn roof. Loose boards creaked. Anna watched him carefully. The way he held his side when he thought no one noticed. The way his breath shortened when he bent forward. She turned back to the stove. "You should sit closer to the fire," she said quietly. Jacob didn't answer. But he shifted the chair an inch toward the warmth. Small movement. Hard to notice unless someone was watching. Anna noticed. She poured another cup for herself. Sat across from him. The fire cracked in the iron stove. Light flickered across the room. Jacob rubbed a hand against his ribs. "Slow. Careful." And his eyes lifted. "That wound never healed right," she said. Jacob's hand stopped. Silence settled between them. Outside a horse stamped in the cold. Jacob leaned back in the chair. "The prairie heals what it can." "And what it can't?" Anna asked. Jacob stared into the fire. "Leaves a man alone with it." Anna said nothing. She reached for a cloth beside the stove. Dipped it in the hot water. Then walked around the table. Jacob looked up sharply. "I'm not asking," she said softly. She placed the warm cloth into his hand. "Just hold it there." Jacob hesitated. His jaw tightened. Then he pressed the cloth against his ribs. Heat soaked through the fabric. For the first time all evening his shoulders lowered a little. Outside the wind picked up. The barn door banged once in the darkness. Anna walked to the small window. Looked out across the yard. The herd stood scattered in the moonlight. Thin shapes under a pale sky. She noticed something. One of the cattle moved oddly. Slow. Dragging a hind leg. Anna narrowed her eyes. "Your herd's not just starving," she said. Jacob lifted his head. "What do you mean?" Anna kept watching the pasture. "That steer near the south fence. It's limping." Jacob rose slowly from the chair. Pain flickered across his face. But he crossed the room anyway. Together they looked out the window. The steer shifted again. Weak. Unsteady. Jacob frowned. Probably stepped wrong in the rocks. Anna didn't answer. Her gaze moved across the herd. Studying. Measuring. "You've had cattle die sudden?" she asked. Jacob crossed his arms. "Few." "How many?" Jacob's voice came quiet. "6 this month." Anna looked back at him. That number sat heavy in the air. "Starvation doesn't move that fast," she said. Jacob said nothing. The fire snapped in the stove. Outside the wind carried a distant sound. Hooves. Faint. Far down the road. Jacob stiffened. He stepped away from the window. Walked to the wall. Lifted the rifle hanging beside the door. Anna turned. "You expecting someone?" Jacob checked the rifle chamber. The metal clicked softly. "Not tonight." Anna listened. The sound faded again into the dark prairie. Whoever rode that road had not turned toward the ranch. Not yet. Jacob placed the rifle back on its hooks. But his eyes stayed on the door. Anna watched him. "You've got more than sick cattle," she said quietly. Jacob didn't answer. He sat back at the table, picked up the empty cup, turned it slowly in his hands. Lantern light reflected in his tired eyes. After a long moment he spoke. "Granger owns the banknote." Anna waited. Jacob continued. 3 months behind. Silence returned to the room. Outside, the wind carried dust across the yard. Anna understood enough. Men like Silas Granger didn't wait forever. They took what drought left behind. Jacob stood again. Walked to the door. Opened it. Cold air rushed into the house. He stepped onto the porch. Looked across the dark ranch. Anna followed. The pasture stretched quiet beneath the moon. Thin cattle moved slowly through brittle grass. Jacob's voice came low. "Lost my brother to fever last winter." Anna listened. "Lost half the herd this summer." Jacob rested his hand against the porch rail. "And the bank says I'll lose the land before spring." The wind blew hard across the empty fields. Anna stood beside him. Quiet. Unjudging. Jacob looked out at the dying ranch. Then at the thin shapes of cattle under the moon. The ranch was bleeding slow. And for the first time since the drought began, someone else had seen the wound. Dawn crept over the prairie slow and pale. Cold light spread across the dying pasture. Frost clung to the fence rails. The herd stood quiet in the gray morning. Jacob Hale was already outside. He moved along the corral fence with a hammer in one hand. Each strike rang sharp in the cold air. Wood against iron. Steady. Unhurried. Pain lived in his ribs with every swing. But the hammer never slowed. Inside the house, the stove door opened. Anna Whitfield fed another piece of wood into the fire. The room warmed slowly. She pulled on her boots. Stepped outside. Morning air bit at her cheeks. Jacob didn't turn when she approached. He drove another nail into the rail. "Stage comes back through tomorrow," he said. His voice carried across the frost. Anna watched the pasture. Thin cattle moved like ghosts through the pale grass. "That steer near the south fence won't last the day," she said. Jacob nodded once. He already knew. Anna stepped past him toward the well. She lowered the bucket. The rope creaked over the worn wood. Jacob noticed something then. A leather satchel rested beside the porch. Not a travel bag. Tools inside. Glass bottles clinked softly. Jacob's eyes narrowed. Anna hauled the bucket up. Half water. Half mud. She poured some into the trough. Then opened the satchel. Small metal instruments. A folded cloth. Dried herbs tied with twine. Jacob leaned against the fence. "You didn't come here empty-handed." Anna kept working. "I rarely do." She walked toward the limping steer near the fence. The animal shifted weakly. Jacob followed. Curious despite himself. Anna knelt beside the steer. Her hands moved across the animal's leg. Slow. Careful. She pressed the muscle above the joint. The steer flinched. Anna studied the hoof. Then the eyes. Then the tongue. Jacob crossed his arms. "What are you looking for?" Anna didn't look up. "Proof." "Proof of what?" Anna stood. Dust brushed from her skirt. "Your cattle aren't dying from drought alone." Jacob's jaw tightened. "You said that last night?" "And I meant it." She pointed toward the water trough. "You ever notice them crowding there more than the pasture?" Jacob glanced back. The cattle stood gathered near the trough. Weak. But drawn to it. "They're thirsty," he said. Anna shook her head. "They're sick." Jacob let out a short breath. "Everything's sick out here." Anna met his eyes. "Not everything." Wind moved across the yard. Loose tin rattled on the barn roof. Anna closed the satchel. Then looked out across the ranch. "This land can still hold cattle," she said. Jacob studied her. Long. Silent. "You talk like you've saved a ranch before." Anna didn't answer right away. Instead she walked to the fence, rested her hands on the rail, watched the pale horizon. "I grew up where cattle were worth more than gold," she said quietly. Jacob waited. But she didn't say more. A crow cawed somewhere beyond the barn. Morning had fully broken. Jacob walked toward the house, stopped beside the porch steps. "You said you'd stay till morning." Anna nodded. "I did." Jacob looked at the sky. Clouds thin as torn cloth drifted across the sun. Rain nowhere in sight. Then he looked back at the herd. 3 more cattle stood hunched near the fence. Too weak to graze. Too stubborn to die yet. Jacob rubbed the scar beneath his ribs. Pain flared sharp. Anna watched him. "You're running out of time," she said. Jacob's voice came low. "Been running out for months." Anna stepped closer, her tone steady. "Give me until the first summer rain." Jacob frowned. "That's near 3 months." Anna nodded. 3 months to prove the herd can live. "And if it can't?" Anna glanced at the pasture. "If it can't?" The ranch was lost anyway. Wind moved dust across the yard. Jacob stared at the dying cattle, at the cracked earth, at the empty sky that refused to rain. Then at the woman standing calm in the middle of his failure. "You work for your keep," he said finally. Anna's mouth curved faintly. "I expected to." Jacob looked at the satchel beside her. 3 months, he said. "Till the summer rain." Anna extended her hand. Jacob hesitated, then shook it. Her grip was firm, warmer than the morning air. Across the pasture, one of the 6 steers staggered, nearly falling. Jacob and Anna both turned toward it. The ranch stood on the edge of collapse. 3 months suddenly felt very short. Morning settled into routine. The kind a ranch learns to survive on. Boots in dust. Water hauled from the well. Fence wire tightened one post at a time. Jacob Hale moved through the yard with quiet purpose. Hammer in one hand, coil of wire over his shoulder. Anna Whitfield followed with a bucket of tools. Not trailing. Working. They stopped along the north fence line. A section sagged toward the ground. Jacob drove a new post into the hard earth. The hammer strikes rang steady. Anna knelt beside the wire. Her fingers worked the pliers carefully. Twist. Pull. Tighten. The fence rose inch by inch. Jacob noticed something. She didn't waste motion. Didn't ask where to stand. Didn't wait to be told what needed doing. She watched the ranch, then worked where the trouble lived. The wind shifted across the pasture, carrying dust and dry grass. Anna paused. Her eyes moved across the herd. 2 steers stood apart from the others, their heads low, breathing heavy. She set the pliers down. "Those 2 again," she said. Jacob glanced up. "Been weak all week." Anna walked toward the animals. Jacob followed. The ground cracked under their boots, dry as bone. One steer staggered when Anna touched its shoulder. She stepped back, studied its eyes, its gums, then the water dripping from its mouth. Jacob crossed his arms. "Well?" Anna looked toward the trough near the barn. "Bring me the bucket," she said. Jacob didn't move at first. Then he turned, fetched it. Anna dipped a cloth into the water. "Let the steer smell it." The animal pulled away, weak but uneasy. Anna watched carefully. Then she turned to Jacob. "They know something's wrong with the water." Jacob frowned. "Water's water." Anna shook her head. "Not always." She walked toward the trough, Jacob beside her. The wood was worn smooth from years of use. Water sloshed shallow at the bottom. Anna dipped her fingers in, rubbed the water between them. Smelled it. Jacob leaned closer. "You smell that?" she asked. Jacob sniffed. Mud. Rot. Something else. Faint. He didn't like it. Anna stood slowly. "This trough hasn't been cleaned in months." Jacob shrugged. "Been busy keeping cattle alive." Anna nodded. "Then we start here." She grabbed the bucket, dumped the trough out into the dust. Mud and black slime slid across the ground. The smell rose stronger. Jacob stared. Anna picked up a stiff brush from her satchel, knelt beside the wood, started scrubbing. Jacob watched her a moment, then grabbed another brush from the barn, kneeled beside her. They worked in silence. Water splashed. Brush bristles scraped wood. The trough slowly changed color. Gray wood under the filth. After a while Jacob spoke. "Never had a woman scrubbing cattle troughs before." Anna didn't stop working. "Never had one watching your cattle die either." Jacob grunted, but the corner of his mouth moved. A small thing. Easy to miss. Later that afternoon the herd gathered again. This time around fresh water. Anna stood beside the fence, watching. One steer drank. Then another. Jacob leaned on the rail beside her. "You always stare at cattle this long?" Anna folded her arms. "I watch patterns." Jacob nodded toward the herd. "And?" Anna pointed. "That black steer." Jacob followed her finger. The animal lifted its head. Steadier than yesterday. Small improvement. But real. Jacob felt it in his chest. A quiet shift. Like the first breeze before rain. The sun lowered toward the horizon. Work slowed. The ranch yard settled into evening. Inside the house the stove burned warm. Anna stirred a pot over the flame. Beans. Salt pork. Simple. Jacob sat at the table mending a torn saddle strap. Leather creaked under his hands. The smell of supper filled the room. For a while only the fire spoke. Then hooves sounded faintly outside. Distant. But real. Jacob stopped working. Listened. The riders passed along the far road. Dust trailing behind them. Anna noticed the way Jacob's hand drifted toward the rifle near the door. "Granger's men?" she asked quietly. Jacob watched the window. "Maybe." Anna returned to the stove. "Then we work faster." Jacob looked back at her. She said it like weather. Not fear. Not worry. Just truth. Outside the ranch rested under the fading sky. Inside the small house the fire burned steady. For the first time in months. The place felt less empty. Wind pushed low clouds across the prairie that morning. The light stayed dull. Gray over the pasture. Jacob Hale stood at the corral gate, watching the herd drink from the clean trough. The cattle looked different. Still thin. But moving easier. Heads higher. A small change. The kind a man notices when he has spent months watching animals die. Anna Whitfield stood beside the fence. Her sleeves rolled. Hands dusted with dried herbs she had mixed into the cattle feed. The smell carried faint across the yard. Sharp. Bitter. Jacob glanced toward the herd again. "That black steer walked straighter this morning." Anna nodded. "It will take time." Jacob rested his arms on the rail. "Time's the one thing we ain't got." Anna looked toward the road. Dust moved there. Far out near the cottonwoods. 2 riders. Slow. Watching. Jacob saw them too. His jaw tightened. Granger's men. They didn't turn toward the ranch. Just rode the road. Studying the pasture as they passed. Measuring. Counting cattle. Anna noticed the way Jacob's hand settled near his belt. Not touching the revolver. Just close. The riders continued past. Their silhouettes faded behind the low ridge. But the feeling they left behind stayed. Heavy. Anna spoke quietly. They're checking if the herd's worth taking. Jacob spat into the dust. Granger checks everything that breathes. The wind shifted again, carrying the faint smell of rain that never arrived. Jacob turned back toward the barn. We'll move the cattle closer to the north pasture today. Anna followed. Why? Less visible from the road. Inside the barn the air felt cooler. Hay stacked along the walls. Tools hanging in careful rows. Anna walked toward the water barrels. Checked each one. Jacob saddled his horse in silence. Leather creaked. Metal buckles clicked. Anna watched him. You expecting trouble today? Jacob tightened the cinch strap. Trouble don't usually send a letter first. They rode out to the north pasture before noon. The land dipped into shallow grass there. A thin spring trickled through the rocks. Not strong, but cleaner water. The herd moved slowly behind them, dust rising around their legs. Halfway across the field Jacob stopped his horse. Something lay ahead, near the fence line. Dark shape in the grass. They rode closer. A young steer. Dead. Its body stiff in the sun. Anna dismounted first. Kneeled beside the animal. Flies buzzed around its mouth. She pushed them away. Studied the eyes. The tongue. The swollen throat. Jacob stood above her. This one looked fine yesterday. Anna nodded slowly. Then she lifted the animal's lip. Examined the gums. Her face hardened. This one didn't die from sickness. Jacob felt a slow heat move through his chest. What then? Anna stood. Her gaze moved across the field. Toward the fence. Toward the road beyond. Poison. The word hung quiet between them. Jacob crouched beside the steer. His hand brushed the grass near its mouth. Something white lay there. Powder. Barely visible in the dirt. Jacob rose slowly. The wind carried dust across the field. He stared toward the road. Empty now. But not long ago. Riders had passed. Anna's voice stayed calm. They're testing how far they can push. Jacob walked to the fence. His hands gripped the wood rail. Hard. Anna stepped beside him. Granger wants the ranch cheap. Jacob nodded once. He'll take it cheaper if the cattle die first. They stood there a long moment. Wind across the pasture. Dead steer at their feet. The rest of the herd grazing slowly beyond. Anna finally spoke. Then we stop losing cattle. Jacob looked at her. And how do we do that? Anna's eyes moved toward the spring running through the rocks. We control the water. Jacob followed her gaze. Then back toward the road, where dust trails faded into distance. Somewhere beyond that ridge, Silas Granger was waiting for the ranch to collapse. Jacob rested a hand on the fence. The wood creaked beneath his grip. For months the land had been dying quietly. Now the fight had begun. And someone had just drawn the first line. Before sunrise, Anna Whitfield was already outside. Cold blue light lay across the ranch. The house behind her glowed faint through the window. One lantern. One stove. One place on the prairie that no longer felt abandoned. She crossed the yard with her satchel in one hand and a tin cup in the other. The air smelled of damp wood, horse sweat, and the bitter trace of something wrong. At the north pasture, the dead steer still lay near the fence where Jacob had dragged a tarp over it. Frost silvered the canvas edges. Anna crouched beside the grass where the animal had fallen. She touched the ground. Dry on top, darker underneath. She pinched a bit of the white powder between her fingers. Rubbed it slow. Then lifted it to her nose. Her face tightened. Not just poison. Mineral salt cut with lye. Cheap. Harsh. Made to burn the gut and sour the water after. She looked toward the spring. A narrow run of clear water slipping through stone. Too small to save a whole ranch. Unless it was used right. Behind her came the sound of boots. Jacob Hale walked down from the rise carrying a shovel over one shoulder. His coat hung open. Morning wind moved through it. He had not shaved. Had not slept much either. That showed in the dark beneath his eyes. He stopped beside her. "You found something." Anna rose slowly. "Not just something." She opened her palm. The white grit sat there like pale ash. This was dropped where the steer grazed. Jacob stared at it. "Granger's men?" Anna closed her hand. "Maybe." She glanced toward the spring. "Or someone who knew exactly where your cattle would drink." Jacob followed her eyes. The water moved clean over rock. But just above the bend, near the reeds, a patch of mud had been churned hard by boots. Not hoof prints. Boots. Jacob walked there fast. Pain caught him halfway. A small hitch in his stride. Then he kept going. Anna followed. At the bank he crouched and studied the ground. Heel marks. 2 men. Maybe 3. One had slipped in the mud and scraped the rock. Jacob ran his thumb over the scrape. Fresh. No more than a day old. The creek gave a quiet sound. Almost gentle. Too gentle for the anger rising in his chest. Anna knelt upstream. Reached into the reeds. Pulled free a torn strip of burlap caught on a branch. Dark stains crusted the cloth. She held it out. Jacob took one look and understood. They used a sack. Anna nodded. To soak poison and let the water carry it down. Jacob looked at the spring again. The only clean water left near enough to keep the herd alive. His jaw tightened until the muscle jumped. "They knew we moved the cattle here." Anna stood. "Which means they've been watching closer than the road." Wind hissed through the grass. Somewhere behind them a calf cried out for its dam. Jacob rose with the shovel still in his hand. "Not like a tool now. More like a promise." And his voice stayed level. "If we leave the spring open, they'll do it again." Jacob looked across the pasture. Fence. Rock. Draw. Too much ground for one man to guard. Then Anna pointed toward the old irrigation ditch half buried near the cottonwoods. A shallow scar running from the spring toward the lower pens. "Was that your brother's work?" Jacob turned. The ditch line lay crooked under weeds and dust. "Forgotten. He started it 2 summers back." "Why stop?" "No water enough." Anna walked to it. Boot toe scraping away dirt. The channel was still there. Not dead. Just neglected. She crouched and followed it with her eyes. "If we narrow the opening at the spring." Jacob said nothing. She kept going. "If we line the first stretch with stone and brush, you could feed water straight to a holding pen near the house." Jacob stared at the ditch. A smaller water line. Closer in. Guarded. Controlled. The idea settled over the land like the first shadow before rain. He looked at her. "That enough for the herd?" "Not the whole herd." She stood and brushed dirt from her skirt. "But enough for the weak ones." Jacob's silence stretched. Then he looked beyond her to the lower pen near the barn. Small. Strong rails. Visible from the porch and kitchen window. No rider could touch it without being seen. "We separate the sick cattle," he said. Anna nodded once. "The ones worth saving first." Jacob let out a long breath. Not surrender. Calculation. The kind a man makes when the world has finally given him one thin chance. By midday they were digging. Sun climbed hot and white overhead. Dust stuck to sweat. Jacob cut the ditch deeper with the shovel. Anna cleared rock and packed the channel walls with clay and flat stone. Work replaced words. Shovel bite. Stone set. Brush dragged into place. The rhythm of survival. By afternoon the new run reached the lower pen. Anna carried buckets back and forth. Jacob set posts and repaired the pen gate. His shirt clung damp to his back. The old wound in his side burned harder every hour. Twice Anna saw him stop and brace a hand on his ribs. Twice he kept going before she could speak. At the third stop, she handed him her canteen. He took it without argument. Drank. Then passed it back. No speech. No thanks. But he did not turn away when her fingers brushed his. That was new. Toward evening, they opened the spring mouth with a narrow cut. Water moved into the ditch slow at first. Then steadier. Cold. Clear. Alive. It ran over stone and clay. Down the channel. Into the lower pen trough with a hollow, beautiful sound. Jacob stood still as he watched it fill. He had heard plenty of sounds these past months. Wind. Coughing cattle. Empty buckets. But this sounded like a door opening. Anna leaned against the rail beside him. The poison only worked because it touched everything at once, she said. Jacob looked at the trough. At the water catching gold from the falling sun. You're saying we stop feeding the whole ranch from one throat? Anna nodded. Exactly. He turned to her then. Really turned. Not looking past her. Not through her. At her. Where'd you learn all this? Anna watched the weak cattle being led into the lower pen. Her voice came quiet. My father bred cattle in Abilene. A beat. When disease came, it never killed the herd first. Jacob waited. She met his eyes. It killed the careless. The words settled heavy. True enough to sting. Jacob looked away toward the ridge road. Far off, dust lifted in a thin line. A rider. Maybe two. Too distant to name. But watching. Always watching. Jacob closed the pen gate. Dropped the bar into place. The sound rang clean. Final. For the first time since Granger's shadow had fallen across the ranch, they had done more than endure. They had changed the board. And somewhere out beyond the pasture, the men who thought this land was dying were about to find out it had started fighting back. Night came hot and windless. The kind of night that made the prairie hold its breath. Inside the house, the stove had burned down to a low red glow. A lantern rested on the table. Soft light. Long shadows. Anna Whitfield sat near the window with a ledger open beside her and Jacob's old account papers spread beneath her hands. Numbers. Dates. Feed costs. Debt marks. The ranch reduced to ink and worry. Across the room, Jacob Hale worked a whetstone along the edge of a skinning knife. Slow strokes. Steel on stone. A hard, steady sound. Outside, the lower pen stood quiet. The weak cattle drank from the new trough. Now and then came the soft clink of horns against wood. A living sound. A hopeful one. Anna looked up from the papers. You paid Granger twice last winter. Jacob did not stop sharpening. He said interest changed. Anna's eyes narrowed. He wrote the second amount in a different hand. Jacob finally looked over. Lantern light touched the scar under his ribs where his shirt gaped open at the throat. His face stayed still. But something in his eyes hardened. He changes rules when it suits him. Anna traced the line of figures again. He's been bleeding this ranch before the cattle ever started dying. Jacob turned the blade. Stone hissed across steel. Outside, somewhere near the barn, a horse snorted. Then silence. Jacob's hand stopped. The room changed in an instant. Still warm. Still lit. But no longer safe. He set the knife down without a word. Reached for the rifle by the door. Anna was already on her feet. The lantern flame fluttered when Jacob opened the door. Night air slid in. Dry. Warm. Wrong. The yard lay dark beneath the half-moon. Fence rails silvered in the dim light. The barn crouched low beyond the house. Nothing moved. Then came the sound. A sharp crack from the lower pen. Wood splitting. A steer bawling in terror. Jacob ran. Pain caught him hard in the side. He kept going. Boots pounded dirt. Anna followed with the lantern held low in one hand, gripping the hem of her skirt. Another crack. Then a rush of hooves. By the time they reached the lower pen, one section of rail had been smashed inward. 3 cattle burst through the gap. Wild-eyed. Foam at their mouths. They charged into the dark pasture. Jacob swung the lantern light toward the far fence. 2 riders. Nothing but black shapes on horseback, already turning away. One of them dragged a burning branch behind him. The fire caught in the dry grass. A thin orange line at first. Then more. Anna felt the breath leave her chest. Jacob. He saw it too. The flames crawled low and quick, fed by old straw and weeks of sun-dried weeds. Not a field fire yet. But close. Too close. Jacob thrust the rifle into Anna's hands and vaulted the broken rail. He went after the scattered cattle first. Always the cattle. Always the living thing he might still save. Anna grabbed a water bucket from beside the trough and sloshed it over the nearest flames. Steam rose. Smoke bit her throat. But the fire had already found the grass along the ditch bank. It ran there like something alive. Hungry. Jacob whistled sharp through his teeth. One steer turned. Another kept running blind toward the east fence. Jacob lunged. Caught the trailing rope around its neck. The animal jerked hard. Pain knifed through his ribs so fierce his knees nearly buckled. But he wrapped the rope around his forearm and held. Dust exploded around him. Behind him, Anna beat at the fire with a wet saddle blanket she had snatched from the fence. The flame snapped back at her. Hot. Mean. Smoke smeared the moon. The second rider suddenly reappeared on the ridge above the pasture. Just for a moment. Long enough for Anna to see him raise an arm and laugh. Then he vanished into the dark. Not helping. Not hiding. Watching. That was worse. Jacob dragged the steer in a hard circle and forced it back toward the yard. 2 more cattle had fled beyond the cottonwoods. Gone. No catching them tonight. He knew it. The knowing hurt almost as much as the wound in his side. When he reached the lower pen again, Anna was on one knee in the dirt, coughing, still beating at a strip of fire climbing the barnside grass. Jacob seized the shovel leaning against the trough and threw dirt over the flames. Once. Twice. Again. Smoke swirled around them both. The fire fought. Then faltered. Then died down to angry red patches. For a moment all they could hear was their own breathing. Harsh. Uneven. The weak cattle pressed against the far side of the pen, trembling in a knot of ribs and horn. Anna pushed hair from her soot-streaked face. Her hands shook now that the danger had stopped moving. Jacob saw it. Saw the black ash on her skirt. The redness on her wrist where sparks had caught her skin. He stared toward the ridge where the riders had vanished. The rifle still hung from Anna's grip. Unused. Too much smoke. Too much dark. Too much chaos. He took the gun back gently. Then stepped through the broken rail and walked to the patch of ground where the fire had started. He crouched. Touched the dirt. His fingers found oil-soaked cloth twisted around a stick. Deliberate. Planned. Not boys playing mean tricks. Not chance. Anna came up beside him. Her voice came rough from the smoke. They wanted the weak cattle dead. Jacob rose slowly. And the barn next. He looked toward the shattered fence rail. The missing cattle. The scorched ditch edge. Every inch of it chosen to wound the ranch where it had just begun to heal. Anna's eyes moved over the yard. Then to Jacob's face. They know we're gaining ground. Jacob said nothing. He walked to the post beside the pen and reset the lantern there. Its light spread over ruin. Broken wood. Scorched grass. Panicked animals. The house behind them. Still standing. Still whole. But barely. Anna bent to gather the torn account papers that had blown from the open doorway. One page had landed in the mud. Another against the trough leg. The numbers had smeared. Granger's name still showed through the stain. Jacob watched her pick them up. Watched the care in her hands. Watched the way she straightened even now, even after fear, even after fire. Something in him shifted hard and final. Not just anger. Not just debt. Responsibility. The kind a man takes when he understands someone else will be hurt if he keeps pretending he stands alone. He looked once more toward the dark ridge. Then to the broken pen. Then to Anna. The ranch had been struck in the night. Not by weather. Not by hunger. By a man who meant to break whatever hope remained. And Jacob Hale knew before the smoke had even cleared. The next strike would not be against cattle alone. Before dawn, Jacob Hale was already in the yard. Hammer in hand. Rifle on his back. The broken pen rail lay stacked beside him in fresh-cut lengths. He set a new post into the earth and drove it deep. Each strike rang hard in the cold morning. Not hurried. Not wild. Certain. Anna Whitfield stood near the trough wrapping a strip of clean cloth around the burn on her wrist. The skin looked angry and red in the pale light. She tried to knot the cloth one-handed. Jacob crossed the yard, took the bandage from her without a word, and tied it himself. Firm. Careful. His fingers were rough. His touch was not. Anna watched his face. Set jaw. Eyes hollow from too little sleep. A man held together by duty and old pain. When he finished, he stepped back. Stay near the house today. Anna's brows lifted. You expect me to stop working? Jacob picked up the hammer again. I expect trouble. Anna looked toward the blackened patch of ground where the fire had licked the ditch bank. Smoke no longer rose there. The smell still did. She reached for the bucket. Jacob caught the handle before she could. I said near the house. His voice was quiet. But different now. Not distance. Protection. Anna let go of the bucket slowly. Jacob carried it to the porch, then returned to the pen and kept working. Rail after rail. Post after post. The weak cattle watched from inside the enclosure, calmer now that the light had come back. Anna stood still a moment. Feeling the change in the yard. It was no longer just survival. It was defense. By mid-morning, the ranch looked tighter. Stronger. Jacob had moved the feed barrels inside the barn. Shifted the tools to the shed near the house. Loaded extra cartridges onto the kitchen shelf beside the flour tin. He worked like a man preparing for weather. Except the storm wore boots. Anna came out carrying a pot of coffee and 2 tin cups. She found Jacob at the gate, stringing a line of old bells and scrap metal across the lower path by the cottonwoods. An alarm. Simple. Frontier simple. She handed him a cup. He drank standing up. Eyes still on the trail. You ever sleep? She asked. Jacob set the cup down on the post. Not much. Anna followed his gaze. Nothing out there but sun on dry grass. Still he watched. You can't guard every inch of this land alone, she said. Jacob's mouth flattened. Wasn't planning to. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small revolver wrapped in cloth. Worn grip. Polished steel. He held it out. Anna stared at it. Then at him. Jacob kept his hand steady. You know how to use one? Anna took the revolver. Checked the weight. The cylinder. Quiet competence. Jacob noticed. Enough, she said. That answer told him more than a speech would have. He nodded once. Keep it on you. Anna tucked the gun beneath her shawl. The bells stirred faint in the breeze. No sound yet. But promise. Then hoofbeats came from the south road. Fast. Jacob moved before the second strike hit dirt. Rifle off his back. Body angled between Anna and the road. A lone rider came over the rise. Dusty bay horse. Town saddle. Old Ben Mercer from Dry Creek. Too old to ride hard unless the news was bad. He pulled up short at the gate, breathing heavy through his beard. Jacob. Jacob did not lower the rifle. Ben lifted both hands. Ain't here for trouble. His eyes flicked toward the scorched grass. Then the repaired pen. Then Anna. Word's gone around, Ben said. Granger's telling folks you've lost your senses. Says strangers are running your place. Says the bank should take the land before more stock disappears. Anna felt the words hit Jacob harder than the fire had. Not on the skin. Deeper. Ben shifted in the saddle. And he's bringing the county assessor out next week. Once your herd counted. Once the death paper enforced proper. Jacob lowered the rifle slowly. His face gave nothing. But Anna saw his hand tighten around the stock. Ben leaned forward. Men in town know Granger plays crooked. Problem is, crooked men like to arrive with witnesses. The horse tossed its head. Harness jingled. Wind moved hot across the yard. Jacob asked only one thing. When? 3 days. Maybe 4. Ben glanced at Anna again. Then back to Jacob. Get your proof ready. He wheeled the horse and rode off the way he came. No wasted comfort. Just warning. That was the West. Jacob stood a long moment staring at the empty road. Then he turned and walked straight to the barn. Anna followed. Inside, dim light striped the floor through the plank gaps. The air smelled of hay and leather and work that never ended. Jacob hauled open an old trunk beneath the loft ladder. Inside lay papers. Brands. Receipts. A cracked photograph. He set the papers aside and took the photograph last. Anna saw a younger Jacob beside another man broad across the shoulders. His brother. Same eyes. More smile. Jacob looked at the picture once. Then set it face down on the trunk lid. No speech. Just one controlled breath. Anna began sorting the receipts by date. He did not ask her to. He only placed the ink bottle nearer her hand. Together they worked in barn shadow silence while swallows ticked in the rafters. Outside, a calf bulled from the pen. Inside, proof of a stolen future slowly gathered into neat stacks. Then Anna found it. A feed bill signed by Granger's foreman. Delivered the same week the cattle first took ill. Not regular feed. Mineral supplement. Cheaply mixed. She looked up. Jacob took the paper. Read it once. Then again. The barn seemed to go still around them. He sold this to me at half price, Jacob said. And his voice stayed low. Because he knew what was in it. Jacob folded the paper carefully. Too carefully. Like a man afraid his hands might do something else if he didn't. From outside came the sudden jangling of a bell line. Sharp. Violent. Both of them moved at once. Jacob snatched the rifle. Anna drew the revolver. They burst into the yard and saw no rider. No man. Only a black dog tearing through the grass with one of Jacob's missing calves limping ahead of it, wild with fear. The calf hit the fence wrong. Cracked a rail. Dropped screaming into the dust. Jacob fired once into the air. The dog bolted toward the draw. Gone. Anna ran to the calf. Its front leg bent badly. Not broken clean. But hurt. Jacob knelt beside her. The animal shivered under their hands. Anna examined the leg. Torn, not snapped. Jacob steadied the calf while she wrapped the joint with splints cut from kindling. Their shoulders nearly touched. Breath and dust. Pain and purpose. When it was done, Jacob lifted the calf himself and carried it into the shade of the barn. He laid it on fresh straw as gently as if it were something human. Anna watched him straighten. Watched the anger in him settle into something harder. Cleaner. He went to the barn door and looked toward the southern ridge. Toward Granger's land. Toward the road where men rode in smiling and stolen darkness. His voice came low. Not to the air. Not to himself. To Anna. They come for this place again. He turned. Eyes steady now. They answered to me first. The words were plain. No thunder in them. No show. But the whole ranch seemed to hear. The house. The pen. The weak cattle. The little calf breathing through pain in fresh straw. Anna felt it too. The line had moved. Jacob Hale was no longer just trying to save his dying ranch. He was standing guard over a home. And over the woman who had taught it how to live again. The morning of the reckoning came bright and merciless. No clouds. No mercy in the light. It laid bare every board of the house. Every rail of the pen. Every rib on the cattle still fighting to live. Jacob Hale stood at the gate in a clean shirt and weathered coat. Hat low. Rifle left inside. Not because he trusted the day. Because today needed witnesses more than bullets. Anna Whitfield moved through the yard before sunrise, setting things in order. Ledgers on the porch table. Feed receipts stacked beneath a stone. The torn burlap sack laid open where anyone could see the lye stains. Even the oil-soaked firecloth rested in a tin pan beside it. Ugly little truths gathered in plain sight. The bell line stirred once in the morning breeze. No warning. Just sound. Jacob watched the south road. Anna watched him. The old wound in his side had stiffened him through the night. She saw it in the careful way he drew breath. But he stood straight anyway. The house behind them smelled of coffee and warm biscuits. A home smell. Steady. At odds with the storm riding toward it. By mid-morning they appeared. First the county assessor in a black coat already sweating through the collar. Then the bank clerk with his leather satchel. Then 2 writers from town. Old Ben Mercer among them. And behind all of them, Silas Granger. Broad hat. Silver watch chain. Smile thin as a knife blade. He came riding like a man arriving to collect what was already his. Jacob did not move from the gate. Anna stepped onto the porch with the ledger in both hands. Granger's gaze found her first. Lingered there. Dismissive. Then slid to the stronger-looking cattle in the lower pen. His smile faltered. Only a little. The assessor dismounted and cleared his throat. Jacob Hale, we're here to examine stock condition and review the debt claim. Jacob opened the gate. Then examine honest. Granger chuckled softly as he swung down from the saddle. Honest is all I've ever asked for. No one answered that. The morning felt hotter suddenly. Flies buzzed near the trough. A calf bellowed from the barn shade. The assessor began with the herd. Counted heads. Walked the pen. Looked at the spring-fed ditch. Looked surprised. These cattle show improvement, he muttered. Granger's smile disappeared. They're dying by inches, he said. Same as the ranch. Anna came down from the porch. Not hurried. Not timid. She handed the assessor the first ledger page. Those inches began changing when the poison feed stopped. Granger turned sharp. What feed? Anna laid the bill on top. The one signed by Granger's foreman. Date clear. Amount clear. Jacob watched the assessor's face tighten as he read. The bank clerk stepped closer. Ben Mercer too. Silence moved through the yard like a drawn wire. Granger laughed once. Too loud. Cheap feed don't prove harm. Anna did not look at him. She looked at the assessor. Then looked at the cattle logs. Dates of illness. Dates of the feed delivery. Dates of sudden loss. She handed over the pages in order. Careful. Precise. The assessor read. The clerk peered over his shoulder. Jacob said nothing. He only stood there like a fence post driven too deep to pull. Then hoofbeats sounded from the north road. Everyone turned. A buckboard rolled into the yard carrying Dr. Ellis Vane from Dry Creek. Town veterinarian. Thin man. Round spectacles. No love for dust. He climbed down stiffly and held up his satchel. Ben said you needed a professional eye. Granger's jaw shifted. A tiny thing. But Anna saw it. Dr. Vane walked straight to the tin pan on the porch. Examined the burlap. The firecloth. Then crossed to the lower pen and checked the cattle one by one. Tongues. Gums. Eyes. He moved to the spring run and sniffed the damp stones near the old bank. Then he came back wiping his hands on a cloth. These animals were sickened, he said plainly. Not by drought alone. Alkali irritation. Like contamination. Likely from water and supplemental feed both. The words landed like hammer blows. Granger took one step forward. Likely ain't proof. Dr. Vane turned to him. No. This is. From his satchel he drew a folded note. A purchase order. Mineral compound and caustic wash sold from Dry Creek Mercantile. Signed for by Granger's foreman 2 weeks before Jacob's first losses. Ben Mercer spoke from beside the wagon. I saw Eli Boone haul those sacks myself. Asked him what Granger needed so much wash for. He said cattle care. A murmur passed through the riders from town. Granger's eyes flashed. You're taking a stable gossip over a landholder's word? Jacob finally moved. One step only. Enough. His voice came low. Your word rode my fences at night. That made the air go still. No shouting. No grand speech. Just truth placed bare in the yard. Anna reached into the ledger and brought out the last paper. The altered debt entry. Second payment marked in a different hand. She passed it to the bank clerk. His face reddened as he read. This amount was changed after receipt, he said. The assessor took it from him. Compared signatures. Compared ink. Looked up at Granger. The silence after that felt bigger than the sky. Silas Granger saw it too. Saw the witnesses. The doctor. The clerk. Ben. The assessor. Saw the story slipping from his hands. His charm failed first. Then his temper. He stepped toward Anna. Fast. Ugly. None of this stands on a stranger woman's word. Jacob was between them before the sentence finished. Not loud. Not wild. Just there. A wall and a worn coat. Granger stopped short. For the first time all morning, he looked uncertain. The assessor's voice cracked out behind them. That is enough. Sharp. Official. Final. He faced the bank clerk. Mark the altered entry void pending formal review. Then to Granger. And mark this property under witness protection from unlawful interference until the county court sees the evidence. Granger stared as if he had misheard. The bank clerk swallowed and nodded. Ben Mercer spoke up then. So did the second town rider. Each one with some small thing remembered. Riders on Jacob's Road at night. Granger's men buying lie in bulk. Boasts heard in Dry Creek that Hale's place would be had by summer. Little scraps. Nothing alone. Together, a noose of truth. Granger understood too late. His power had always depended on men staying quiet. But quiet had broken. He turned for his horse with murder in his eyes and nowhere to put it. No one helped him mount. No one spoke for him. He rode out under the same sun he had arrived beneath. But smaller now. Much smaller. Dust swallowed him by the south road. The yard stayed still after he was gone. The kind of stillness that comes after thunder passes. The assessor packed his papers. The doctor gave Anna a single respectful nod. Ben clapped Jacob once on the shoulder before climbing back into the wagon. One by one they left. Taking dust and talk and witness with them. By noon, only the ranch remained. The porch table still held the ledgers. The tin pan. The empty coffee cups gone cold. Anna gathered the papers slowly. Her hands were steady now. Jacob stood in the yard looking toward the road where Granger had vanished. His shoulders had not lowered yet. Years of pressure do not leave a man in one morning. But something had. The bend in him. The surrender. Anna stepped beside him. Neither spoke. The wind moved softer than it had in weeks. From the lower pen came the sound of cattle drinking. Clean water. Calm sound. Jacob looked at the house. Then the barn. Then the woman standing beside him. The ranch had not been saved by luck. It had been fought for. Seen. Defended in the open. And for the first time in a long while, Jacob Hale was no longer standing alone against the world. 3 weeks later, rain came at last. Not a hard storm. Not the kind that tears roof boards loose and floods the low ground. This rain came gentle. Steady. Silver against the dawn. It touched the pasture first. Then the barn roof. Then the porch steps where Anna Whitfield stood with one hand wrapped around a warm tin cup. She watched the drops darken the earth. Watched the thirsty land drink without complaint. Behind her, the house breathed with new life. Coffee on the stove. Bread cooling under a cloth. Fire banked low because spring no longer needed winter's full heat. Jacob Hale stepped out onto the porch carrying his hat in one hand. He did not put it on. Just stood beside her and let the rain touch his hair. For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence felt different now. Not empty. Full. From the lower pasture came the soft sound of cattle moving through wet grass. Not stumbling. Not coughing. Grazing. Jacob looked out across the field. Fence posts stood straight again. The north ditch held a narrow line of clean running water. The lower pen had been opened 2 days ago. The weakest cattle no longer needed it. Anna handed him the second cup. He took it. Their fingers brushed. Stayed a moment longer than they once would have. Jacob drank. Coffee and rain and wood smoke mixed in the cool air. A home smell. The kind a man spends years thinking he can live without. Until he can't. By mid-morning, the rain softened to mist. Work waited. It always did. But now it waited like honest work. Not punishment. Not defeat. Jacob repaired the porch step that had sagged all winter. Anna moved through the kitchen with sleeves rolled, setting jars in order on the shelves she had scrubbed clean the week before. She opened the windows. Let the damp spring air carry out the last smell of smoke from the fire attack. Let in birdsong from the cottonwoods. The house answered her in small ways. More light on the table. A curtain tied back. Fresh bread instead of stale biscuits. A basin of clean water near the door. Jacob noticed every change. Said little. But when he came in with mud on his boots, he stopped at the threshold, wiped them carefully, and glanced toward the floor she had just swept. Anna caught it. Said nothing. Only turned from the stove with that faint, quiet look he had started to understand. Not pride. Not surprise. Something warmer. Near noon, the calf with the splintered leg tried standing on its own in the barn. Jacob saw it first. The little thing pushed up shaky and stubborn, wavered hard, then found its balance in the straw. Anna came to the stall at his call. The calf blinked at them both with damp black eyes. Alive. Healing. Jacob rested one hand on the stall rail. Anna adjusted the bandage gently. Their shoulders touched in the dim barn light. This time neither stepped away. Outside, rain tapped soft on the roof. Inside, the calf breathed warm into the straw and leaned against life. Jacob looked down at Anna's hand on the splint, then at the neat wrap on her wrist where the burn had finally begun to fade. His voice came low. "Looks like you were right." Anna glanced up. "About the calf?" He shook his head once. "About the ranch." The words stayed between them. Plain. Heavy. Earned. Anna looked toward the open barn door where wet pasture shone pale green under the thinning clouds. "It was never dead," she said quietly. "Just waiting for someone to stop letting it bleed." Jacob let that sit a while. Then he nodded. Small. Certain. That afternoon, Ben Mercer came by with a sack of seed potatoes and a grin too old to hide. He left them by the porch and refused payment. Said Dry Creek had decided it preferred honest ranchers to polished thieves. Said the bank clerk had already sent notice that Jacob's altered debt was under review and likely to be cut near in half. Said folks in town were talking different now. About the Hale place. About the woman who knew cattle better than most men knew their own hands. After he rode off, the yard felt quiet again. But not lonely. Never lonely now. Toward evening, Jacob walked out beyond the barn to the rise where his brother had once planned the unfinished irrigation line. The ground there was damp and dark from rain. Anna found him standing beside the old cottonwood, hat back on, hands resting on the top rail. He did not turn when she approached. Only shifted enough to make room beside him. Together they looked over the land. Pasture greening. Cattle moving slow and healthy. Smoke rising from the chimney behind them in a thin blue line. The ranch no longer looked like a place waiting to be buried. It looked lived in. Claimed. Kept. Jacob reached into his coat pocket and drew out the old photograph of his brother. He looked at it once. Then tucked it carefully into the post crack beneath the cottonwood, safe from the wind. An offering. A remembering. Anna stood quietly beside him. No questions. No intrusion. Just presence. Jacob's hand came to rest on the fence rail between them. Anna laid hers beside it. Close. Then closer. Until his fingers turned and gently took hers. The evening light warmed everything it touched. Wet grass. Silver ditch water. The porch roof. Far off, a meadowlark called. Nearer, the cattle settled calm for night. Jacob looked toward the house. Then at Anna. There was no grand speech in him. Never had been. He simply lifted her hand once, firm and certain, and held it as though it belonged there. Because now it did. When darkness finally came, it found lamplight glowing through clean windows. It found bread on the table. 2 cups beside the stove. A healed calf sleeping in fresh straw. And beyond the door, a ranch breathing steady beneath the spring stars. What had arrived on a stagecoach as trouble had become mercy. What had begun as a bargain had become a bond. And in the quiet warmth of that house on the healed prairie, Jacob Hale understood that the life he thought was ending had only just begun. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again, hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past, and your heart pointed west.